Basketball fans, appreciate you guys for coming back in with me. Really appreciate it. As you know, per usual, what this is, unless you've been living under a rock, the best, the most entertaining, the most educational, informational, multi-level basketball content that I provide you guys with in the form of a podcast, that being Tate's Take. Let me let you know right now where you can find that at anywhere you find your favorite podcast, that being iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. And be sure to follow along also on social media at Tate's Take Hoops. That is TATESTAKEHOOPS. Now, I know it's been a little while since we've done this, but everybody's been looking forward to the college basketball stuff now that the season is getting ready to tip back off, we hope. And I want to let you know that I did bring in a special guest with me here on today. That would be none other than Tom Noie, reporter and journalist for South Bend Tribune. Follow him on social media on Twitter at Noie NDI. That is at TNOIE NDI. Tom, how you doing, brother?
Outstanding. And I do have to admit, I've been one of those that's been living under a rock, but it's been a Notre Dame football rock. Like, I have to cover Notre Dame football for August, September, October, a little bit of November. But once mid-November comes rolling around, I tell my boss, you know what? Pull back on the Notre Dame football a little bit, even though they're second ranked in the country, because I'm ready to start year 23 covering Notre Dame men's basketball.
Oh, my goodness. And then I was taking a little bit of a look at your bio. Have you been at the Tribune since 92?
I have been with the South Bend Tribune since 1992, 23 years covering Notre Dame men's basketball. The first 4 or 5, I covered Notre Dame football for us. So I've been all over the place. I've been back and forth with Notre Dame football, Notre Dame basketball, 15 years in the Big East, the last 8 in the ACC. So it's like I get the best of both worlds. I spent 15 years going to Madison Square Garden. Now I've spent the last 8 going to Cameron Indoor. Not a bad gig.
I know that's right. Cameron Indoor, probably much like a lot of other people, very, very high on my list. I've covered probably 5 consecutive Final Fours. Was looking forward to it coming down to Atlanta this year. And unfortunate set of circumstances. Obviously, that didn't happen. So I'm still keeping my fingers crossed as well on getting to Cameron Indoor, to that venue, and been to Madison Square Garden for the first time around this time last year for the Champions Classic. So don't tell anybody that that I had tears in my eyes just thinking about all the historic events that took place. And I want to get into talking about Notre Dame, obviously, and that's why you're here. I want to pull this up first because I was wondering what in the world was head coach Mike Brey thinking when he put this schedule together. And I'm not even sure that it's completely finished just yet. At number 13, Michigan State versus Tennessee at home, I believe. A home game as well against Ohio State, Kentucky as well. Then you got at Purdue and at Howard, which might be a shock to some people, but that's not the usual Howard. That looks a little bit different now with McCurmaker. What was going through? What was the process with all of this and why he wanted to do it? Because it seems like he's ready to go with this group.
It started off way back when this whole thing got wacky in the springtime, when they decided when they were in quarantine, the campus was shut down. He couldn't even get into the practice facility. His key card, everything was wiped out. So it was like, what am I doing? He went to Florida. His son is the head football coach at IMG Academy. So he went to Florida, kind of hanging out at the beach, said, okay, I'll stay for 1 week. 1 week turned into 2. Then it turned into 3. Then it turned into 4. And he's kind of sitting there, and it was almost like he was recharged coming off of last season's near disaster when they finished 20-12. So it's like, what are we going to do this year? He started thinking about this year's team. Like, he's got a good core coming back. He's got a veteran mix. They're finally older. So he calls up John Calipari and says, hey, Cal, what do you think about starting a series? You know, and if Mike Brey didn't like this basketball team and didn't think that they were going to be good, there's no way he's either making a call to John Calipari or taking a call from John Calipari. So he's like, we're going to be pretty good. I want to play Kentucky. Like, let's go to Rupp Arena.
Sure.
He felt so bad that COVID wiped out a possible trip to the NIT. And look, last year, this team needed to go to the NIT. It was an NCAA tournament team. and coming off 3-15 the previous year, he was cool with that. So he felt bad that he couldn't be around his guys. They didn't have summer school. They didn't have anything that they would normally have. So what he wanted to do was to like dangle this carrot in front of his basketball team. Like, hey, look, we're in quarantine. Everybody's at home. It's tough to find a gym. It's tough to find a workout. But let's keep this in mind. How about if when you come back to school in the fall, that we go and we hop on our charter flight and we go to Kentucky and play in Rupp Arena? How about that? So that got his guys going a little bit. So it started with that. And the more Mike Brey was thinking, he's thinking, you know what? I have no idea what this season is going to be like. Like, are we going to play? Are there going to be cancellations? The football team already had one game with Wake Forest. They were supposed to play in September. That got pushed back to December because of the COVID outbreak over on campus. So he started thinking, there's no game. Like you start thinking in November, if you're a college basketball coach, you're thinking one thing: how do I get my team to March Madness? How do I get back to the NCAA tournament where Notre Dame hasn't been in 3 years? That should have been Mike Brey's biggest concern. But the more he thought about it, the more he thought, I don't know if we're going to play 27 games, if we're going to play 20 games. I've heard people over at Notre Dame say they'll be fortunate if they get 15 games in. So Mike Brey was thinking, okay, if it's going to be this wacky where we don't know what's going to happen,
let's beef it up.
Absolutely. He said, let's just go for it. Like taking calls from Rick Barnes. Let's play Rick Barnes. Let's play Tennessee. He and Tom Izzo are real close. Tom and Mike Brey said, where can we go that get a quality opponent? You know, it's probably going to be a night game up at Breslin Center. So we can have our pregame meal over on campus, hop on a bus, take an interstate 2 hours north, get off the bus, go to the gym, play a game, get right back on the bus and go home. And Tom Izzo's like, come on up. We'll play you. Yeah. So Notre Dame's going to open against Michigan State on November 28th. It's the craziest schedule Mike Brey's played, and he's the first to admit when he kept letting me know, we're playing this game, we're playing this game. Hey, by the way, I think it was a week ago today when he said, by the way, we got something going with Tennessee on December 4th. I said, are you just absolutely freaking nuts with this schedule? Sure. He goes, check back with me at Christmas because I very well might be. So that's how that whole thing came together.
Yeah, we'll know a whole lot more about where that team is at. And you know what? It's funny you say that. And I was smiling ear to ear because you could probably see over my shoulder. I'm a Spartan my own self. So I'm a little feeling my own way, a little bit in my feelings and licking my wounds a little bit that I won't be able to attend that game. So while that's disappointing, it just kind of reminds me of how typically Tom Izzo kind of schedules a lot of his teams early in the year so they'll know where they're at by a certain point and get ready for March and so on and so forth. So that's what that kind of reminds me of more than anything. Tom Noie with us, reporter and journalist from the South Bend Tribune. Make sure that you go and give him a follow on Twitter and some of the outstanding work that he's put together. And also I had the opportunity to pick up, finally came mailed in Blue Ribbon, my college basketball yearbook. And I was taking a look through this and I'm like, I've already been talking to this guy. I mean, it was the most amazing content. I'm not just saying that because it was you, because guess what? I didn't even know it was you till I got to the end of it. And I just thought that was awesome. And so I really wanted to let you know as to how much I enjoyed that. I want to talk about next some of the players on this particular roster because we know about how much they are losing losing TJ Gibbs, losing John Mooney, who was really big for them, a double machine to an extent. Reminds me of, who was his name? Luke
Herringody.
Luke Herringody, kind of in that similar kind of, role or whatnot. And Rex Pfluger, who I thought was obviously some injury issues, but I thought that he was very underappreciated, not necessarily by teammates, but by a lot of people who paid attention to college basketball. And who they bring back is one guy I talked to when I was in high school in Michigan, believe it or not, Tom. I played Saginaw Buena Vista and played up against Torrey Jackson for sure. I think he was a sophomore and I was a senior at the time. I talked to him a little bit. We had some conversations about Prentice Hub. He said that this guy's special. Give me an overall take. Like, does he have the keys to the city at this point? Is this his team?
Well, it was his team toward the end of last year. Like Mike Brey likes to say, he likes to draw comparisons, get guys going, get guys fired up about playing. And he went to Prentice Hub late January, early February, when the Kansas City Chiefs were making their run to the Super Bowl. And he said, Prentice, you see this guy, Patrick Mahomes? He said, you are my Patrick Mahomes. Like, you have the keys to everything. You're driving this car. You're leading us. And that really got Prentice Hub like thinking, yeah, this kind of is my team. I can be the guy. I can be a Jaron Grant type of guy for the Notre Dame basketball team. I can be a Demetrius Jackson. So everything starts, continues, finishes with Prentice Hub as the point guard. And I think he's been a guy where freshman year, it was a little rough, but it was a little rough for all of those guys. Sophomore year, still a little shaky, but I love Prentice Hub because what he does for this basketball program, one thing that they really, really need and haven't had since the Elite Eight back-to-back runs in 15 and 16, and that's swagger. Like Prentice Hub, he's okay. He's a really good player at home, but what he loves to do is go out on the road, Deshaun, in the ACC in buildings like Cameron or the Dean Dome at Chapel Hill or Virginia and the Yum Center down in Louisville. And the more teams and the more fans get on him and yell at him, and they're yelling this and they're doing that,
he turns it up.
It goes up. Like he and Joe Girard last year going back and forth, knocking down threes left.
I remember that.
That was one of the great early season games last year.
They're kind of yapping and
they're like Joe Girard. He's hitting from 40 feet.
Oh yeah,
Prentice Hub is going to come back and he's knocking down threes. So I love the swagger that he gives this team because a lot of the guys on this team, whether it's Juwan Durham, Thane Goodwin, Nate Laszewski, they're really good guys, but they're quiet guys.
Sure.
But Prentice Hub, man, if you're going to succeed in the ACC, you need that swagger, and they get a lot of that from number 3.
Yeah, he can definitely kind of get into it. I mean, he's one of the more balanced players specifically within the ACC and maybe even the country who can, give you some buckets, obviously, on the offensive end, and on the defensive end, he can really, he's really grimy and really gritty in that role. And I personally, I tend to love players that are like that. Who would you say, Tom, is maybe the player on the roster that maybe nobody's really talking about maybe enough? You had your eye on them maybe a little bit last year, and they could kind of have somewhat of a breakout season and a major impact for this team's success this year.
Easy answer, Deshaun, and it's Cormac Ryan, a transfer from Stanford, was a top 100 guy coming out of high school. When it came down for him to make his college decision a couple of years ago, it was Stanford and it was Notre Dame. And so he chooses Stanford, goes out to the West Coast. He's an East Coast kid, grew up in New York City, lives in Boston right now, lives basically right down the street from Boston College in Chestnut Hill. So he decided to transfer a couple of years ago, and it was like a no-brainer. He was at the top of the list. He knew Mike Brey. He knew the program, and he also played for the same AAU program as Pat Connaughton, the Middlesex Magic out in Massachusetts. So their AAU coach is really connected to the program. And he was a guy last year. You know how when you transfer – and you're coming to a new program, you have to sit out that year. You're not playing in games. Your practices are your games. And he and TJ Gibbs almost on a routine basis, and Mike Brey loved this. They almost came to fit. They almost threw fists in practice.
Oh, really?
Because Cormac Ryan, he'll get up in you, he'll guard you, he'll compete, he'll battle you. And when it came time to games, he's sitting over there at the end of the bench in street clothes, but he was like the biggest cheerleader guy that was into the game. He's pulling guys aside, telling them this and telling them that. Not a lot of pub going around Cormac Ryan this year, but Mike Brey likes to compare Cormac Ryan as a combination of 3 guys that he's coached in this program. Steve Astoria, a 4-year guy. Chris Quinn, a 4-year guy, now the lead assistant with the Miami Heat. And, oh, by the way, 2010, 2011 Big East Player of the Year, and Ben Hansborough. So he's a combination of all those 3. Wow. He plays like any of those 3 guys. Notre Dame's going to have a really good year.
It's funny that you say that and mention that again, and I'm not trying to turn this into a Michigan State podcast, but it appears by looking at the physicality and the practices and some of the guys that he recruits, it seems like it's much like some of those, really physical and gritty practices. And it's always good to have guys like Cormac Ryan. You're talking about Cormac Ryan alone to go along with Prentice Hub. Just that type of mentality is something that I personally, I absolutely love. And, when you're talking about a guy like Mike Brey, I've always been under the impression, I don't know what it's like for other people on the outside, but just sitting back from the outside looking in, one of the most, I feel like, underappreciated, underrated coaches all the time. I feel like he gets more with less every single year or every other year, but for the most part, so often that it feels like every other year. I absolutely love it. How do you expect for Mike Brey to capitalize? I think they went on like the last 13 games or whatever, went 9-4. How do you expect for them to capitalize on that with this particular group?
I think Mike Brey saw signs of this thing turning last year in January. And I always remember the day for obvious reasons, because it was the day before the helicopter crash with Kobe Bryant. Late January, Tallahassee, Florida, a late game at the Donald Tucker Center against nationally ranked Florida State. Notre Dame doesn't get a couple calls go their way. They mismanage the clock. They quick shoot it. They can't find it. They lose at the buzzer. They fall to 2-6. Mike Brey post game. Now, Mike Brey likes to fashion himself as the loosest coach in America. And hey, everybody would love to play for me because I love him. I'm having fun. But you know what? Inside, man, I'm sure his stomach's turning. It's churning. He's got that fire in his belly. He wants to win. So they're 2-6. And post game, he just absolutely loses it. Like, I'm the most laid back guy. Not that night. He goes off on the referees, calls out John Gaffney for not making a call, calls out the ACC saying, you know what, don't treat us like the ugly stepchild because we don't bring football into the league. So he really just lit everybody up. And it cost him $20,000. So after that, they're 2-6, and you're thinking, you know what? This could be the beginning of the end for Mike Brey at Notre Dame in South Bend. It had been 20 years since he'd been here. The previous year, injuries, inconsistency, ineffectiveness. They go 3-15 in the league. They finish last, and you're thinking they're going to piggyback 3-15 on a 2-6 start. I don't see how Mike Brey survives this. Like, I think he's just going to say, you know what, forget it. But after going 2-6 in the league, they go, I think, 8-4 to finish 10-10. And when they won those 8 games, Mike Brey saw signs from this junior class that, okay, now I know why. Now I can see why it was the highest rated recruiting class that I've had. A lot of people put them as a top 15 recruiting class. So Mike Brey saw coming out of Tallahassee and the way they were able to bounce back. Prentice Hub takes more of a leadership role. Nate Leshevsky grows up. Dane Goodwin grows up. I know I've got Cormac Ryan sitting on the bench. That's going to be a 35-minute guy the minute he gets eligible. Mike Brey likes this team, and it almost rejuvenated him. Like, okay, now we're going to make our run, because ever since that, and it's funny because ever since that last trip to East Lansing at Breslin Center in 2017, this program has been absolutely snake bit by bad injuries. Like, they lose Bonzie Colson. Bonzie Colson was a first-team lock. Yeah, all ACC.
I remember.
Player of the year, maybe a first-round NBA draft pick. That night against Michigan State a couple years ago,
I remember,
he started feeling the pain in the foot. So he broke his foot. They were ranked 5th in the country the last time they went to Michigan State. So Mike Brey, I think, again, he's liking this team to say, you know what, we're going to play Michigan State. We're going to play Kentucky, because I feel like it's going to turn around and we're going to finally be old again, like some of my old teams were where they went to the Elite Eight.
It's funny you even mentioned that, man. It's crazy because I'm just sitting back thinking when you say something about Mike Brey, that maybe even potentially like just fathoming the thought of not being at Notre Dame, it just doesn't really make sense to me, And I understand from a business standpoint and all that good stuff, but it just doesn't really feel like Notre Dame. I mean, we're talking 20, 21 years at this point. I mean, it just doesn't even seem right to me. And I've always been the person that said, and granted, I mean, he's a little up there in age and so forth, and who knows when Kay is going to get out of town, but I've just always been the person that thought that he would have been the perfect replacement.
No, don't say
no,
it.
I know. I don't want to say it too loud, but that's just always been my thing. And it's also not that a lot of Coach K's guys that came under his tree has been the most successful, even outside of Mike Brey. Let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to hold you for too long.
No, you're good.
what would you say that the realistic expectations are for this group, for you, your expectations, or even if it's different, the fan base's expectations?
The fan base expectation is unrealistic in my point. As far as I'm concerned, they think they should go to the Final Four. They should go to the Elite Eight. Now, my baseline expectation every year, at least make the NCAA tournament. I know this year's going to be hard given the schedule, given the league schedule. Like we talked a lot about the non-conference schedule. They've got, as their repeat opponents, they're going to play Duke twice. They're going to play Virginia twice. They're going to play Miami twice. They've got to go to Louisville. They've got to go to North Carolina, and then they get Florida State here. So the ACC is not going to be a cakewalk. But I think if you're as established as you are, as this program has been in the ACC, at least make the NCAA tournament. And I think Notre Dame fans as a whole kind of see what the football team does. Like they're ranked second. They may go to the college football playoff for the second time in 3 years. And they think the basketball program should do the same thing. And it just doesn't work that way. Like the guys that a Michigan State or a Duke or a Carolina get, they're not the same type of guys that come to Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame guys come here for the entire academic athletic experience. They're just not playing hoops. They're not just coming here for a year or two and heading off to the NBA. Like they're 4-year guys. One of the reasons Notre Dame got Trey Wirtz, who's a transfer from Santa Clara, was he was interested in getting a graduate degree in the business school. Like you just you don't get transfers that they come through a school and say, "Hey, I'm interested in your school, and I want to play hoops."
Right, but
business program. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, finish in the top half of the ACC. I'm not saying go top 4 because the top 4 are always going to be Duke, Carolina, Virginia, and Louisville, or Duke, Carolina, Virginia, and Florida State. So those 4 are always usually pretty set at the top. But if you can finish in the top half of the ACC and make the NCAA tournament every single year, you got a pretty good thing rolling in South Bend.
I think I've only got probably about 2, maybe 3. I think the third one would be a quick question. This one a little bit longer. If you assume that Prentice Hub is probably going to be the primary ball handler for this team, we know about how he gets after it, aggressively on the defensive end. He's fearless. He's assertive. He likes to attack and execute and all those good things. Who would you say is his reliever for this year to kind of give him a breather? Because they kind of seem like they appear to be kind of thin in that particular area. Who would you say would be the guy that would come in and maybe send him to the bench, let him get a cold drink of water and a Gatorade towel before he checks back in?
Nobody. Like you're going 38 minutes a night. There were times earlier in Mike Brey's career when he had guards like Chris Quinn and Chris Thomas. Chris Thomas, when he was a freshman, either freshman, sophomore year, they had played that was the year they played so many overtime games. In league play in the Big East, Chris Thomas averaged over 40 minutes a game. Like he played like 41.5 minutes a game. So average came out. So he was like that. Chris Quinn was like that. Jaron Grant was like that. Like if Prentice Hub gets in foul trouble or needs a break, he can go to the bench. Cormac Ryan will become the primary handler. But this is a very thin team. They have only 9 scholarship players available as we sit here on November 12th or November 11th because Elijah Taylor, freshman, gone for the year, ankle surgery. Robbie Carmody, a guard from Pittsburgh, Gatorade Player of the Year coming out of high school. He's had a torn labrum, a torn ACL, and now a busted kneecap. He's right now, Robbie Carmody, seriously, is on a 7-year plan with all the eligibility that he has. So they've got 9 available guys. It's going to be by committee if Prentice Hub can't go, but it's going to be Prentice Hub, Dane Goodwin, Cormac Ryan for long stretches on the perimeter in the backcourt.
You know what? And since you took one of my ideas, I guess I was thinking about, first of all, you mentioned so many good players, and people might, if you're not really that close to the game or close to the program, the institution, whatever, what have you, you may not, some of these might not come off and be eye popping to you. But when you're naming guys like Basturia and Chris Quinn and probably my favorite, only not saying he's the best player, but my favorite player probably through there is Chris Thomas for sure. And there's another one I'm thinking of who was just there, 2 years ago? So not last year, but the year before last, point guard.
Demetrius Jackson?
Caucasian point guard.
Pat Connaughton? Not a point guard.
Maybe it was Vasteria. I think that it was probably 2 years ago, Vasteria. So pardon me on that. But I mean, that just goes to show so many really, really good players. Like I said, back before, Luke Herringody. I mean, there's been some really, really good players that have come through this program. And I think that, Notre Dame is just one of those programs I just never really thought gets enough credit along with the coach, because they're always pretty much successful for the most part. My last question to you is, how would you, and I've always kind of been curious of this, being from Michigan but not spent too much time up in Indiana, how do you describe Indiana basketball? Like just between high school, the collegiate level, or I mean Pacers, okay, sure, but just between that whole realm, everything in between, how do you describe Indiana basketball to people? Because it's so different. I'm in Atlanta, and it's football crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like where it's like Indiana basketball lives here. Like, how do you tell a person what to expect in terms of basketball and regarding to that when they come to Indiana?
It's not a sport. It's an absolute way of life, like nonstop. We've been in this pandemic since March, and I have not played one game of pickup since March, and I'm going absolutely crazy. Like usually in the summertime, I'm 52, and we've got a group of guys in our church league, maybe 10, 15 guys. We'll go out to a local school in the summertime. It doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees, it's hot, it's humid, there's no breeze. Man, we're out there for 2-3 hours playing pickup. These guys have the same church league guys had a text chain going for the last 6 weeks, last 2-3 weeks. Now it's mid-November, like Thanksgiving's in 2 weeks. These guys were still playing outside in November just because they needed to get their runs in. And when it gets dark, like it's up here, when you come up here and with the time zone and everything, it's dark by 5:15.
Yep.
They're trying to figure out how to put car lights and LED lights around the court. Like it's basketball in Indiana. It's just a religion. Like you have to play it. If I can get outside and shoot for 15, 20 minutes every other day, if I can go get a run in at the church, at the school, it's just something where it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how well you play. It doesn't matter what team you follow. Like you've got Michigan State fans, IU fans, Purdue, Notre Dame. People here just love their basketball and they appreciate good basketball. Like they know the game, and that makes one of the aspects that makes my job so enjoyable is you have fans that are knowledgeable. Like they're going to be asking me about a set that Mike Brey ran or a substitution pattern. They're not just concerned about who's winning the game. So Indiana basketball, there's just nothing like it up here.
I love it. And being down here in Atlanta, I mean, what you just did is you just took me back home for a second, because so much of that is so similar in Michigan to where I'm from. And like you said, pulling up the car, I was going to say to you where I'm from, what we did is when it get dark, somebody was coming up who was old enough at that time to even have probably took his mom's car and pulled it up to the blacktop and pulled the brights out so that we could see and be able to play. But you took the words right out of my mouth, and I wasn't even expecting it. That is Indiana basketball. Nothing like a brand, nothing better than just a good brand of just Midwest basketball and just everything that goes into it. I love it. Tom,
one last quick note on Indiana basketball. I know you got to run, but
no. Take your time.
When the pandemic started and they shut everything down, the school districts and the park districts around this area went around and took all the rims off every basketball court because they didn't want people to come outside. This is how crazy my hoop group is. We had guys that were going to go outside and tried to go back out to the courts that we play at and weld rims into the backboards so we could play in April, May, June, and the school, the janitors at the school were coming out and they were like, no, you cannot play here. So we were off the courts like all summer. But that's how crazy people are here. They're like, pandemic, it doesn't matter. Let's just weld a couple of rims, roll a ball out, and the first one to 21, let's go.
Down here, they say, don't mess with our SEC football. And a lot of pretty much every place in the country, everything gets crazy. Don't mess with our election, whether it's red or blue and this and that. don't mess with our rims
Exactly.
on the blacktop. Don't. We will weld them.
Yep.
You will not be able to get these things off of here. Tom Noie, reporter and journalist from the South Bend Tribune. Make sure you go and follow. This man does excellent work, and just does a phenomenal job all the way around. Give him a follow on social media, on Twitter at TNoieNDI. That is at TNoie, TNoieNDI. Make sure you go ahead and give him a follow. Tom, thank you so much for coming on with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And hopefully at some point throughout the duration of the season or something, maybe I can get you to come back and join us. And if I'm up in your neck of the woods, I can get down with a little bit of pickup. I can do a little bit of 5-on-5 or some 3-on-3 if I'm welcome.
Maybe. What do you mean maybe? I'm coming back. We're talking hoops. This isn't a one-shot deal, my man. Hit me anytime. Hit me anytime. We'll talk ball.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Tom.
You got it.
That was Tom Noie. Appreciate him for coming on, man. He gave us some excellent stuff, and just kind of took me back home for a second. I was really happy about that, and it just put a big, huge smile on my face, and I was just thankful to be able to bring him on as a guest, talking about some Notre Dame basketball, talking about the head coach and Mike Brey, and just everything across the landscape of what's happening there in basketball country in the state of Indiana. And I thought that it was great. And I appreciate you guys for joining me here on the night. Going to get ready to watch some high school basketball. Imani Bates, some of the best talent in the country. Chet Holmgren, Bronny James is going to be coming on later tonight. Who else am I forgetting? Mikey Williams is coming on. Oak Hill. It's some pretty good. Oh, Jaden Hardy. That's a name that you guys want to keep in mind and you want to remember. So if you're watching right now and it's live, this whole thing's going to go up. Make sure that you check that out starting, I think, here in probably about an hour or so, around 7:30. You got some really, really good, talented high school basketball. And I'm going to have my pen and my notepad and everything like that out to be able to take some notes. And just kind of bask in my glory of being able to have basketball tipping off again. Appreciate you guys for joining me. Remember, share this with a friend, share it with your family, a colleague, an enemy, your mom, your grandma, a little bit of everybody, and let them know where you can find the best, the most entertaining, the most educational, and the most informational basketball content in the form of a podcast. And you can find that anywhere you find your favorite podcast, that being on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Red Circle. So if you got if you have the Apple products, but you don't have the Android, no excuses for you, or vice versa. Same thing as well. So I'm just thankful to have you guys back with me, to have basketball back once again for however long that might be. And just really looking forward to all of it. So I really appreciate you guys for joining me and looking forward to talking to you guys again. We got Rashad Phillips. I think Rashad Phillips is tomorrow, a talent expert, draft expert, really has an eye for talent. We got next week Ken Segura on Monday, that's going to be joining us talking about Georgia Tech. As well. So we've got good high school NBA stuff. Oh, it's going crazy. It's ridiculous. So make sure you keep your eyes and your ears open for that. Appreciate you. And remember, streaming live on YouTube as well as Facebook. Thank you guys for being a part of the show and for your comments and everything and so forth. I think I want to give my buddy here a shout out because he always comes through and shows some love. Todd Corder, who I talk to relatively often. I'm going to be joining him as well. Appreciate him for coming on as well and showing a little bit of love. And also Controversy Raphael. Appreciate him for coming on with me as well. So really looking forward to a little bit more of you guys' contribution to the show. And I really appreciate those of you who have already subscribed, those of you who are getting ready to do it here in the near future. And everything all across the board, and make sure that you share it with a friend. So until the next time, where you never know who you're going to get right here on Tate's Take the Podcast, who's going to be a guest, who's going to be joining us next. Till next time, I'll see you on the back end in a minute.